What we would like to bring out specifically in this forum today is like a job interview. We want to know who is the best fit for the job. And our assumptions continue. We see the job of legislators having three aspects: legislating, i.e., drafting, amending, voting for bills; constituent service, availability, communication; and committee work, which combines aspects of the first two.
Thank you, Greer, for all of your work. Thank you, Gail, for being our timekeeper. But I want to thank Pat Weedoff and Maria Hidalgo for helping with these questions. This has been a monumental undertaking, and we're all learning. And I appreciate you all so very, very much. And I thank the candidates, too, for running.
Morgan, you have a last name starting with A. Take it away. You have 2 minutes for your self-introduction.
Well, thank you. So my name's Morgan Abraham. I'm a state representative representing LD10, and I'm running for the Senate in LD18. And I'm so grateful I could be here. I didn't think I was going to be able to make it. I'm on Army orders, but I traded the night shift to be able to be here. So I might be up very late tonight, but I at least get to be with you all. So that's a good trade-off. So in the spirit of talking about this as a job interview, I want to tell you about my current job as a legislator and why I'm asking for your vote to come back to the legislature in the Senate. So as a legislator, I think I hold two important roles. First is promoting our values. And the way we do this is by running bills that move the ball forward in Arizona. That's why I've introduced many bills that promote our values. These bills include a universal pre-K system, something I'm very passionate about, sunsetting all tax loopholes to increase money for education, and retiring coal and natural gas plants by using securitization. These are new big ideas, but they need to be brought forth in order to move the ball forward so one day we can win on these issues. The second important role that we don't talk about as much as a legislator is working with Republicans to kill bad bills and getting our Democratic priorities on Republican bills. Every day I work to build relationships with the other side in order to do this. This year alone, I've killed about 9 bad bills by building a relationship with Republicans to get one of them to vote no on one of these bills. These bills include banning ESG investments, crippling teacher pensions, and many bad bills based on the big lie that the 2020 election was stolen. In addition to that, we work to get our priorities on their bills. One example of this is the Water Authority, where I'm one of 3 Democrats negotiating to promote conservation on that Water Authority, the Water Authority bill being a Republican bill. So that's kind of the idea that I see what's important about a legislator. It's not only having the values and writing the bills that are big, bold, but it's also working with the Republicans in order to stop bad ideas. Thank you.
Okay, next up is Davis.
Hi, everyone. Glad to be online with everybody again. And I know I saw some of you this morning. My name is Nathan Davis. I'm a former middle school social studies teacher. I still substitute teach in TUSD. I currently run a small business, and I really want to get to the reason why I'm running. Arizona is at a critical juncture in terms of education. We are losing our teachers with 10, 20 years experience. We do not have the teachers with the same experience replacing them. Our schools are in disrepair after decades of underinvestment. The water crisis is here. It is intimately among us. In rural areas, they are running out. In certain urban areas, they have started a contingency plan. And we have to make changes now. We have to have policies now to avoid catastrophe in the future in terms of education, in terms of climate change, and in terms of our fundamental freedoms. Those are under attack, and we must reinforce them now. We must ensure that every Arizonan has the right to vote, can access the ballot, ensure that abortion care remains legal, and eliminate the unconstitutional constraints on access to healthcare. I also want to mention what I plan to do specifically. And I'm really glad that we're having this forum because I cannot wait to get into the meat of the specific proposals that we're going to need, including universal public pre-K, expanding community college to be free for every high school graduate, expanding access to healthcare through universal primary care, which is something that I'm very interested in. and I believe has a lot of possibilities and benefits. And with that, I look forward to answering everybody's questions.
Okay, next up is Nancy Gutierrez.
Hi, I'm Nancy Gutierrez. I'm running for the State House in LD18. I am a teacher at Tucson High. Currently, I started my teaching career in Arizona in 1994. And I'm also a mom, a feminist, a leader, a community member, and a former military spouse. I'm running because it is my time to step up to the plate and get things done. I'm a good listener. I have experiences in business as well as the community and in volunteering. I want to take my teacher's voice to our house and stand up for our students and staff. Right now, we are not safe in our state, and we need someone who is willing to put themselves out on a limit, out on the line, and stand up for what's right, and I will do that. I have been a leader in organizations such as the Tucson National Organization of Women and Manzanita Elementary School FFO. I'm ready to take all of these experiences and talents and my ability to be a listener and work with people who don't always believe the same things that I do. And I'm going to take all of those skills to our state house, because it's going to take us listening to each other. It's going to take someone who can not always have all of the right answers, but can pull people in who do have answers and come to this working together to promote bills and pass laws that will help us be safe and educate our students. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Next up is Chris Mathis.
Hi, I'm Chris Mathis. I was appointed in December to fill the seat of Randy Freeze in the legislature. And so I've been in the office now for 7 months. I am a lawyer and a professor of practice at the U of A College of Law. I teach healthcare law and policy and aging. My area of practice, legal practice, is elder law. I've also done some policy work, both in an academic setting and also in the United States Senate, and worked in the US House, British Parliament, and Illinois General Assembly. I'm running to invest in public schools, protect voting and reproductive rights, preserve our precious water resources, and fight climate change. Also to fight for common sense gun reform. I think that one of the things that I've noticed after being in the job for 7 months is there's a pretty steep learning curve. I think that's just the reality of it. And it is also the case that we're losing a lot of talent in the Arizona delegation. Representative Freeze has already stepped down. Pam Hanley isn't running again. Domingo de Grazia isn't running again. So I think that it's a good idea to have at least one member of the delegation have the experience of a whole session under their belt. And the reason that's important is because so much of what we do, as Morgan mentioned, it's not just about trying to stop bad bills or trying to get good bills passed, but stopping bad bills. The way that we do all that is through relationships. And the reality is we are right now the minority, and the better relationships we can form with everybody in the legislature, the more we can listen, the more we have an ability to sort of see the pockets and try to get good things done for the constituents of LD18. Thank you.
Next up, Kat Stratford.
Hey everyone, my name is Kat Stratford. I'm running for one of the 2 open seats in the State House. Thank you so much for having me here. Thank you so much to Nancy Gutierrez and to Morgan Abraham for sending me the link. I accidentally got the participant link. And thank you to Susan and Brian for enabling the captions. A lot of you have already seen me and know a little bit about me. I'm a single mom. I'm a member of the deaf and hard of hearing community, as well as the LGBTQ community. Happy Pride Month. I'm also a survivor of domestic violence and the proud parent of 2 incredible kids, one of whom happens to be trans, and both of whom are waking up into a world in which they are needing to be afraid to go to school where they will have fewer rights than their grandparents. And that's a big part of why I'm running. But I'm also running because I believe that lived experiences are invaluable in the legislature, and that we need policymakers who understand what it's like to apply for SNAP benefits and have navigated those types of systems. I represent a lot of constituencies, and I'm running to make sure that all of us have a voice in our democracy. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Kat. Next, Priya.
Hi, everyone. I'm Priya Sundareshan. I'm running for the Senate seat. Good to see you all on here, and some of you even this morning. Just a quick recap, since many of you may have already known my background. Born and raised in Tucson, I'm a teacher. I teach environmental law at the law school right now. I'm a union member. I'm a mom, and I want to focus, therefore, on my experience and the qualifications, and that's what I'll bring to the legislature, as well as my track record. I have experience practicing environmental and energy law at a law firm in DC, as well as in a nonprofit environmental defense fund advocating for sustainable fisheries with Congress and the federal administration, and also here teaching at the university. My degree background is that I have an engineering degree from MIT, of course, U of A law degree, and a master's in natural resource economics, all of which I will bring in a holistic manner to represent you. I also want to focus on my track record. I have a history of advocacy on the right side of the issues for many years. I have been, advocating for the people on environmental issues for environmental nonprofits. I work at the university. The projects I take on are on environmental issues, but they're also environmental justice issues, making sure that we, comment, for example, on behalf of the Native peoples whose rights and are being trampled during, with the Oak Flat proposals, things of that nature. I will be fair but skeptical of utility and fossil fuel claims, and I will not accept money from utilities or fossil fuel PACs. And so I think it's important to look at who you represent, who you pick to represent you, and what their track record has been. Thanks.
Thank you. And last for our introductions is Charlie Verdin.
Hello, everybody. I'm Charlie Verdin, and I'm running for the State House in LD18. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today, and thank you to the LD18 Democrat team for organizing this forum. I'm one of the owners of an online retailer called Fangamer based here in Tucson. I helped found the company back in 2007, and we've grown the company from a tiny operation selling shirts out of an apartment bedroom to a successful multinational company with about 100 employees, branches in Japan and Europe, as well as ownership over our own shirt printing company here in Tucson. Building a business is a constant exercise in policy creation and revision, finding creative solutions to complicated problems and finding compromise among sometimes very stubborn personalities. I know what it means for your work to impact the lives of others. At some point, my company became financially stable enough that some of us felt comfortable having kids, which is a rare state among millennials like myself. I personally am the father of 2 small children, a 3-year-old and a baby who turns 1 next week. These kids will be in public schools in just a few years, so education funding is a big concern for me. I'm also a member of the Pointe-au-Tremont Indian tribe in South Louisiana. My tribe's ancestral land has largely disappeared due to erosion over the past few decades due to corporate negligence, poor water management, and climate change. So I'm very committed to making sure my new home here in the desert remains inhabitable for the foreseeable future. Our biggest challenge here is our dwindling water supply, which is a problem we absolutely need to address as soon as possible. Again, my name is Charlie Verdin, and I really look forward to answering your questions.
Okay, so let's get down to some questions. Question number 1, we're going to start with Nathan Davis is going to answer it. Question number 1. All of the homeowner conservation efforts that Tucson Water has encouraged and paid for in the last 12 years, such as rainwater harvesting, xeriscaping, landscaping, that sort of thing, has yielded a water savings of about 6 weeks over the course of 12 years. So private consumers are not gobbling up our water. On the other hand, agriculture and corporate drilling for water is gobbling up the majority of our water. Here is the question. What is your legislative plan to address the sustainability of our water resources in Arizona with specific reference to agriculture and the corporate grab of Arizona's water resources? Nathan.
So we need to have statewide programs that look at water use and where it goes and how much it costs. Pima County, as well as I think Pinal and Santa Cruz County, and I think one other county have water resource management in place. However, Cochise County and a few other and many other parts of Arizona do not. The efforts that I've been speaking with a lot of water experts about this, the efforts that Tucson has made are fantastic. There still is room for improvement. A huge area too, besides agricultural use in rural Arizona, is use in Phoenix and in the Valley. They are not taking this as seriously as Tucson is. And, you know, Tucson's a great place. I love it. The bulk of Arizonans live in Phoenix. And if there is not water management happening there, we will feel it in Southern Arizona as well. So what I would say is we need water management throughout the state at the local level. And we have to, basically what we have to do is go to these big water users and say, look, do you want to be here in 20 years? Do you want to be here in 50 years? Because if we don't do anything now, you won't be. These orchards are not going to be viable mid-century and later. Agriculture is not going to be viable. If we want to have viable agriculture and industry and new housing developments, we have to take actions now.
Great, thank you. Next is Nancy.
Well, I think that we have a great opportunity in Arizona to use the resources of our 3 state universities more than we are using them now. And so I would propose having our state universities and the agricultural departments work with local farmers to try and come up with a plan to go from such heavy watered crops such as cotton and alfalfa to less water heavy crops. And I do think we can do that. We have some of the best scientists and agricultural experts in the whole nation in Tucson, Arizona. And I think that if we incentivize the universities to work with these corporations and agriculture, and then vice versa, have them work with the universities, we can not only help solve our water crisis and be innovative and leaders in the Southwest for this, but we can also give our students opportunities to have real world experience working with these climate issues. So just going back to education, the opportunities are there. And we need to bring these 2 facets together, create policy that benefits both of them, and then move forward in that direction. Thank you.
Chris, you're up next.
Yeah, I think to what Nancy was saying, one of the my favorite bills all session was a bill that went through the Natural Resources, Energy and Water Committee that I serve on, NREW. And that was a bill that did really just what Nancy was just talking about. It is a pilot program, I think $30 million. It's run through the University of Arizona, through the cooperative extension, and it's to try to get our ag users to transition to drip irrigation. And that's kind of exactly the type of stuff that we should be doing. And I think, as Nathan said, and as the question points out, ag is using, I think, something like 70% of the water usage in the state is ag, and so it is not if but when that ability runs out. And so the ag folks in Pinal County, folks in other rural areas are going to have to work together with the rest of us in the state to figure out a way to conserve. I think also, to the point of the question, we really need to take a look at our groundwater management, because we don't have the kind of comprehensive groundwater management in the state that we need. And I think that would get to some of the corporate drilling that's come up. And again, some of this went through the NREW committee also that we tried to stop.
Thank you. Next up is Kat.
Thank you so much. So obviously, at the risk of sounding redundant, we absolutely need to be focusing first and foremost on water conservation. And I think a great way to do that is by expanding our water management areas. We have 5 in the state currently, and by expanding those to go throughout the state, we can tell exactly where we're using water that we can't afford to be using. It requires just acknowledging the fact that we do live in a desert and our water is precious. Additionally, there's been talk before about having a board that oversees water management in Arizona. And I think that because there are 22 federally recognized tribes in Arizona, and they have always been the first and best stewards for the use of our natural resources, that they should absolutely have a very heavy presence on any board that's overseeing water use. Thank you.
Thanks, Kat. Next, Priya.
I really love we're talking about this issue and that everyone has been diving into it in such detail. This is an area close to my heart. I would recommend that, the question is correct. The Tucson water, our urban areas have done a lot already to reduce our usage, and yet it's a drop in the bucket, metaphorically, compared to the larger water use by our agricultural and corporate sectors. And so one thing that we've mentioned is expanding the Groundwater Management Act and GMA areas to cover more of the state. We are seeing some voluntary efforts already on that front. People in Cochise County are petitioning to establish a groundwater management area to cover them. That's great. I think we should work from the legislative side to make sure they're allowed to opt in, as well as perhaps mandate that groundwater management coverage so that we have safe yield of our groundwater. There's so much else we can do with our groundwater management. For example, groundwater management areas, most of them are for sustainable yield, but Pinal County is for planned depletion. Let's all get to sustainable yield. 100 years of sustainable yield water should be expanded, not just for home building, but for all industries. We shouldn't grandfather in too many. And of course, the pilot projects for those crops that are low water usage. There's the Water for Arizona Coalition has pilots for Waiuli, which is a rubber substitute. And that's time. So there's more.
Okay, thank you. Next, Charlie.
Yeah. So on the efforts that the city of Tucson have made, I think those are very important. They are definitely, obviously, individual action is never going to make up for the shortfall of water that we see that we need, but they're still very important. And I would definitely support continuing those efforts because it's all making a difference, and this is a problem that's urgent enough that we are going to have to come from it, address our water shortage from as many angles as we can. In addition, we need to examine our new housing developments, especially around the Phoenix area, because that city is especially intent on expanding as far as possible into the desert, but without having a sufficient plan for how these houses are actually going to be watered. That's going to make a big difference going forward. We have to make certain that they actually do have a plan to keep those houses watered in a sustainable manner. But yes, agriculture, we definitely need to subsidize more water efficient crops. We do need to help incentivize more water efficient irrigation methods. We need to do all of it at the same time and as soon as possible.
Thank you. Last up for this question is Morgan.
Well, thank you. I love this question because it's literally what I've spent the last 2 months of my life working on with the Water Authority. So in the context of the job interview, I'll tell you about that and kind of what we're looking for. 2 interesting stats that you hinted at in that question. 1, 72% of all the water in the state is used by agriculture. And 2, the Pima County has doubled in population over the last 30 years, but have used the same water. And so what we're trying to do at the legislature, working with the majority, is promote the conservation programs that Tucson has championed. We literally got the city of Tucson involved at the table in order for them to take those same programs and expand them all around the state: Phoenix, Glendale, Tempe. That's one big ask that we have as Democrats at the legislature. The second one, which a lot of people hinted at already, is water management. Right now, Maricopa County, Pinal County, and Pima County, those basins have what's called AMAs, and the rest of the state does not. What we're asking for at the legislature as Democrats is statewide water management, something called an RMA, which is actually a Republican bill by Regina Cobb. So every day we're negotiating, we're working hard in order to promote the conservation that's near and dear to our hearts here in Tucson, and also the water management that's near and dear to our hearts in the Pima County Basin. And every day we're getting closer to hopefully having that pass and be enacted in law.
Question number 2. There is only a vanishingly small chance of gaining a Democratic majority in the House and the Senate in the 2022 election, although the Republican majority may just be razor thin as it has been in recent sessions. The right has become increasingly radicalized. Working across the aisle to create coalitions may be the only way to get your bills passed, and this is going to take skill. Can you give us an elevator speech in 90 seconds about a significant effort you have made in your life where you used this sort of skill to build consensus? Nancy, we're going to start with you.
Okay, thank you. So as a teacher, I spend my entire career influencing students to come to my way of thinking. And so I do think it's really important for us to reach across the aisle. I have effectively gotten 15-year-old students day in and day out who have not chosen to take my yoga class at Tucson High. They come in, they're very reluctant, and I welcome them in. They say, I don't want to stay in this class. I'm going to talk to my counselor. And I say, that's fine. Come on in anyway. And within a week, they are on a yoga mat with their shoes and socks off, doing things that they never thought were possible with their bodies. And when I re-ask them, so did you talk to your counselor? They continually tell me, you know what, miss, I think I'm going to stick it out. I do this every single day as a teacher. As the department chair in my PE department, I also had to convince the rest of the staff that our department as PE teachers are worthy of opinion in our school. And by the end of my 5 years as department chair, they were coming to us to ask how we could help them with their academic classes, getting kids involved, getting kids to come to the table and do their homework and be good citizens.
Okay, thank you. Next up is Chris. Wait for your picture, Chris.
Well, I think there are many examples in law practice where I've, on behalf of clients, sought solutions that were mutually beneficial. That's our job. So that's a skill set that I've been able to develop. I think as a specific example, they'll go back to my days as a legislative aide in the United States Senate. And so I did healthcare policy, and I worked for the senator from Nebraska, and we had a lot of folks in the state of Nebraska who were in the insurance industry. And so we were able to work with them in our office. And but in order to forge consensus, it was necessary to work with folks who represented other interests, other stakeholders. And so there was a specific piece of legislation, the genetic anti-discrimination and testing legislation, that we worked on and worked with Senator Ted Kennedy's office and staff. They had better ties to the patient community. And we were able to work together, forge language that wound up getting passed into law to protect people from underwriting based on genetic discrimination. I think that's a good example of how to work together to get things done that benefit everybody.
Thank you. Okay, Kat, you're up next.
Hi.
Wait for your picture. There you go.
I'm so sorry. I apologize. I was one in the group. So there's actually quite a few examples that spring to mind, but the one that really sticks out for me is one I just spoke about on Keith DeConcini's podcast. So as I've mentioned before, I'm a survivor of domestic violence, as are my children. And without going too much into detail about a story that's not necessarily just mine to tell, we went through a very difficult period through the court system. And the end result of that is that now I have to work on a pretty daily basis with a Republican who is also my former husband and abuser. He comes to my house. I have to make tough decisions about the two most important people to me every day with this person. And that's probably my best example, but it has carried over into all of my political work, including my work on the Biden-Harris campaign, which was focused a lot on turning Republicans and independents to Democrat voters. Thank you.
Thank you. Priya, you're next. Wait for your picture.
Waiting. Okay. Thank you all. I will first respectfully disagree partially with the premise of the question. I think we cannot give up on flipping the majority. We absolutely have to do everything we can to do it. Let's not give up. Okay. With that said, of course, I agree that we will likely need the ability to work across party lines and across, differences in opinion. I do that in my current role, teaching at the university where I direct a clinic, where I work with farmers and ranchers around the state who don't always have the same opinion on how public land should be used or how private land should be used and regulated as the most environmentalist of us. But we do work together, and we try to find that common ground even now to make sure that we are adequately protecting our public lands. But I will also jump back in time to when I was at Environmental Defense Fund in DC, advocating for sustainable fisheries in the darkest days of the Trump administration, when we had Trump in the White House and Republicans leading both houses of Congress. That was a time when the environmental community was really in fear for the very basic statutes, our fundamental environmental statutes being eroded. And I was leading the coalition of the environmental organizations to save the Magnuson-Stevens Act, which has been protecting fisheries and keeping them sustainable. And in that effort, we had a broad coalition of environmentalists working hand in hand.
Okay, thank you. Next up is Charlie. Go ahead.
All right. Well, in terms of working with Republicans, as a business owner, I feel I possess the vocabulary necessary to speak to the economic concerns of our more business-minded Republican colleagues. And I think I can use that vocabulary to translate my progressive ideals into something they can digest without them knowing that that's what's happening. I exercise diplomacy constantly in my job, both with my coworkers and in contract negotiations. In the end, it comes down to being polite and sincere in your negotiations and making your opponent to sort of want what you want, basically, and to not be too proud to let someone else think that my ideas were originated from themselves. It's a bit of a mental game in that way, but yeah, I have a lot of experience doing that.
Thank you. Morgan, you're up next.
There, right. So, well, I love the question because it's what I've spent the last 4 months at the legislature trying to do. And I'll give a couple specific examples of relationships that I've built and bills that we have killed because of that. There was a terrible bill, and it sounds funny in hindsight, but it would have banned all teacher pensions and police pensions, public pensions, from investing in any company that promoted abortion. And as silly as that sounds, this bill had 31 votes in the House at one point. What that means is probably would have been 75% of the S&P 500 that our teachers who worked their butts off, my mom included, couldn't invest their pensions in. And so obviously it's hard to connect with a Republican on the abortion issue these days, but you have to connect to them on another issue, their values. And so what I did is I sat down with a couple of these members and I said, hey, we don't agree on abortion, but this bill is not about abortion. This bill is about letting working people retire in peace and earning as much return for these working police officers and working teachers as possible. And so that's how you connect with the other side, is you understand what values they care about, and then you connect the issue to those values. And because of that, we were able to kill that bill and two other bills that day. And on top of that, I also got on the mic that day to give those Republican members cover by explaining those viewpoints in order to allow them to vote no. So I think it's a really important quality to have in a legislator, to be able to connect with the other side to stop bad bills.
Thanks, Morgan. Nathan.
Okay.
Nathan, there you are.
Sorry. Yeah, I can't see myself when it pops up. So I'm going to disagree with the premise of this question. Yeah, it's going to be hard. We might not be able to win the majority now. Parity, we might be able to get this cycle or next cycle. We are eventually going to take back the legislature. And I just want to, let's start with a few things. In terms of education, the Republicans have refused to work with Democrats to advance public education. Instead, they go for vouchers. They are passing bills to restrict the ability for us to vote. They are doing nothing substantial on climate change. And they pass unconstitutional bans on the right to choose and the right to have an abortion care. 80% of them, 80% of elected Republicans in the legislature right now voted to overturn the 2020 election. This is not a group to work with, and I don't think the people of Arizona and the Democrats want us to be going up there and doing that. I think what we need is to have policies ready to go. And what we say is, here's the Democratic policy for public education. Here is it for climate change. Here is it for healthcare. This is where we're going to start from. If the Democrats want our votes, they can come to us.
Okay, there we go. So now we're on to question number 3. Also 90 seconds you have for this. In your campaign strategy as of right now, how are you appealing to or plan to appeal to independents as well as Democrats? Please give specifics. And we're going to start with Chris.
Well, I think there are a number of issues that are that appeal to independents. I think there are actually a number of issues that are more in the nonpartisan category than some of the other ones that we tend to talk about a lot. Certainly, water is one of those, and I think the more we talk about that, I think the more that draws in independents, just as it draws in Republicans and Democrats. I think also when we talk about trying to, for instance, increase manufacturing jobs in the state of Arizona, I think that's something that independents, Democrats, Republicans can all agree on. So I think there are a number of issues like that. I am married to an independent, so I hear the independent perspective in my household on a daily basis. I think also that to some of to the last question, that really is kind of harnessing the power of independence, because it is about a third in the state of Arizona, is crucial. And I think that is, to Nathan's point, to some of the other points, how we do regain the majority, whether it's this cycle, next cycle, or whenever. So it is key. But I think keeping the I went to Senator Kelly's campaign office kickoff this morning, and he really hit a number of issues, I think, that appeal to independents.
Thank you, Chris. Next up is Kat.
Waited this time. Okay, so I actually love this question. the real answer is that my campaign strategy is relying on very specific data targeting to make sure that the independents we're talking to are independents who have a lot of my shared values and also have voted in recent elections. But that's very boring and not quite relevant to, I think, the heart of the question. What it really is about is making sure that we're like finding shared values. And I think that one thing that a lot of independents really want in Arizona is better education. Nobody wants to see our state lagging behind at 48th in education, 48th in funding. I think that that's something that a lot of independents can agree on and can be brought to our side of the table on. And that's pretty much my entire answer, is just finding those shared values, nurturing them, and starting a conversation that way.
Okay, thank you, Kat. Next up, Priya.
Hello. Okay. So specifics of my campaign strategy are exactly the same as what Kat was referring to. I am, in a primary. So my targeting is to talk to Democrats as well as independents who are likely to vote in a Democratic primary. And the messaging is turnout, right? Or the goal is to turn out those voters. And so to independents that I come across, I want to make sure that they are requesting that Democratic primary ballot. And I know that aligns very strongly with some of the goals that LD18 has in terms of reaching out to voters, reaching out to those independents who may align with the Democratic Party and talking to them about what the Democratic Party stands for. So I don't think it's too much to get into, because I think it aligns very well with the work you all are doing as well. And then, substantively, water issues are absolutely important to the people I'm talking to at the doors. I can lean in on my experience and expertise on water law issues, as I am a lawyer and I teach environmental law, I teach natural resources law, and I've written articles about water law issues in the state. So I can really dive into that and talk to voters about specifics about the water crisis that we need to be addressing. And then similarly, everybody at the doors, when I am talking to voters, education is paramount. They fully agree. And that is true. We know that that's true across Democrats as well as independents.
Thank you. Charlie, you're next. You're up.
As far as reaching independence, it certainly depends on the individual independent. But the goal, I think, is to be an advocate for our democratic values. It's our job to make people understand, to convince people that the things that we want, public education, environmental conservation, and so on, that these things affect them personally. We need to do the work to see these issues from the perspectives of everyday people and to make our case. That's the job, both as a candidate running for office and as a legislator championing our bills and amendments. That's the work I'm doing. Whenever you talk to people, you talk with them as long as it takes to come to an understanding.
Okay, thank you. Next up, Morgan.
So the strategy for my campaign, I think, is to talk about issues and talk about values and frame them in a way that's difficult to argue against. One thing I talk a lot about is I want to live in an Arizona where the next generation has more opportunity than I had. And when I was in high school, we spent more on education per pupil, inflation adjusted, than we do now. Republican, Democrat, Independent. It's hard to argue with that. That's a fact. And the only way to fix it is to put more money in our schools. I want to live in an Arizona where my kids, my future kids, have enough water to sustain themselves and to thrive. That's another hard thing to argue against if you're Republican, Independent, or Democrat, and that means active management areas and watershed management. So I think a lot of what our jobs are as candidates is to frame issues with our values, but Democrat priorities: education, fighting climate change, standing up for abortion, standing up for gun control. but frame those issues in a way that speaks to all Arizonans and makes it difficult, Republican, Independent, or Democrat, for them to argue against you. And that's how we win hearts and minds. And that's how we're going to take the state and turn the state blue.
Thank you. Nathan.
Okay. So, my top 4 issues that I've been talking to Democrats at the door are education, democracy, healthcare, and climate change. And those are issues that the vast majority of Arizonans of all political persuasions are also concerned about, want to see things happen. And the vast majority of Arizonans agree with the policies of the Democratic Party. Majority of parents send their kids to public schools. Majority of Arizonans want public education to be funded. Majorities of all parties vote by mail and vote early, and want to see access to the ballot expanded. Healthcare is a critical issue, and the majority want to see healthcare access expanded, and they want abortion care to remain legal and accessible. And in climate change, we live in a desert. Everyone, Democrats, Republicans, Independents, can see that we need to use our water wisely. So how do we reach independence? We say what we're going to do. And I think importantly also is we communicate, not necessarily at the door, but we communicate what the Republicans are actually trying to do. That they are not trying to fund public education. They are not trying to expand access to the ballot. They are restricting access to healthcare, and they are doing, very little to nothing on climate change. So we tell independents what we're going to do, and we provide good policies.
Thanks, Nathan. Next up is Nancy.
There we are. Well, my campaign strategy for reaching out to independent voters is to talk to them about the issues. That's the whole reason I'm running this campaign, is to make change. Most Arizonans want fully funded education. They send their kids to public schools, and they want that because it also provides for a much stronger economy if we are educating our kids well. They also want their kids to be safe in their schools. And our schools are not as safe as they could be right now. I think most Arizonans want to know that we have safe gun legislation, and I am working to do that. Also, most Arizonans want the same choices for their bodies without government intervention that we have not had for 50 years. And when I talk to voters about these issues, this is what they want a dialogue about. We don't all have to think the exact same thing, but these are hard issues that when talking to people at the door and talking to people on the campaign trail, they want all of this. So I don't know that we need to make it an independent or a Democratic, I say this, you say that. We need to listen to each other and find a way to work together to bring all of this about, because I deeply care about Arizona. I've lived here most of my life. My 2 daughters have been raised here, and I want us to have a safe and educated and healthy population. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, question number 4. This is going to be sort of a flash round. Hope you guys are ready. So this question has to do with 3 issues: gun violence prevention, reproductive rights, or as I like to call it, bodily autonomy, and voting rights. Those 3 things: gun violence, reproductive rights, and voting rights. These are 3 social issues that are front and center right now. These are also issues that are flashpoints with the radical right, with much virtue signaling and posturing for their constituents, although polls show that the majority of Arizonans are not aligned with the positions of the extreme right wing on these 3 issues. So here's the flash round. Tell us, please, your proposal for legislation in each of these areas, even as a first step. So basically, I'm looking for a gun violence prevention bill, a reproductive rights bill, and a voting rights bill. And, I know there's thousands you could be suggesting, but what what is your proposal for legislation, even as a first step on these 3 items? And this is like in a perfect world. I'm not saying that you're not going to get blowback from the Republicans. I'm just saying, what's your first approach to it? And so we're going to start with Kat. You have 90 seconds for this question.
Okay, so I'll start with the gun legislation aspect. Obviously, I think we can all agree that universal background checks are absolutely needed. Currently in Arizona, there is absolutely nothing stopping somebody from selling a gun without any background check to any person. There's absolutely no oversight. It's really ridiculous. Additionally, I also think we need legislation in place to make sure that people who are seriously mentally ill do not have access to these weapons. That would have actually stopped the January 8th shooting. Jared Loughner had a very lengthy history of mental illness, and it was well documented by law enforcement. So those 2 measures I think would be necessary. In terms of reproductive rights, we need to repeal the 15-week ban, obviously. I also want to repeal the laws that call for a waiting period and a very invasive vaginal ultrasound. And then on to codify Roe v. Wade in our state. To protect voting rights, I think we need to automate voter registration and reinstate the PEVL. And I think that's going to cover it for me. Thank you.
Okay, flash round. Okay, next, Priya.
All right. I hope I'll try to get it.
Wait a minute, wait for your picture.
Okay.
Okay, good, go.
Great. I will start with the bodily autonomy. Fully agree. We got to repeal what's on the books, the 15-week bill that was passed. We have to repeal the old territorial bill that criminalizes the providing of abortions. We definitely should codify Roe versus Wade so that we at least are protecting the right to an abortion to that 22 or 23 week viability period. And so those are some examples there. For voting rights, this is an area dear to my heart. I'm a voting rights advocate, a lot of ideas. We certainly need to restore PEVL from what undercut it last year. What I would really like us to see is undoing some of the restrictive laws that Arizona has had prior to even these last few sessions. I think voter ID requirements are excessive. I think voter ID has been shown to dissuade people at the polls. That said, voting by mail isn't adequate and a way to get around voter ID requirements. I will also say that I think, the Arizona law that took us to the Supreme Court last year, we should be allowing ballot collection by friends and family and neighbors, because that helps rural people, old people, people with disabilities vote more easily. A lot more ideas there. We'll come back to that. I just want to make sure for gun violence protection, I want to see waiting periods. I want to see background checks. I also want to see requirements for safe storage and proper training for use of especially dangerous firearms.
Thank you. Next up, Charlie. Go.
All right. So starting at the top, gun violence prevention. I don't think that accessing a gun should be quick nor easy. I think it should involve waiting periods, and I think it should involve a thorough background check. But furthermore, I think that if we're going to have people who do own guns, we need to take the idea of responsible gun ownership very seriously. If you own a gun and somebody else gets their hands on it and hurts somebody, I think that the owner of the gun should be the one held responsible, whether they sold it to somebody or they didn't secure it properly. So that's enough for gun ownership. Bodily autonomy. I think that there should be no restriction on abortion. A woman's bodily autonomy should never be abridged for any reason. And as far as voting rights go, I think that voting access should be automatic for everybody, regardless of, or for all citizens in any case, even if they are currently incarcerated. I think that everybody who is a citizen of the United States should have easy access to voting for and having a say in the laws that govern our land. Yeah.
Thank you. Next up, Morgan.
So on guns, I gave a speech on the floor a couple days ago on guns and what the Army does for guns. And so I'd like to run a bill and call it the Army best practices for guns. And what that would include is background check, as every member of the Army has been background checked. That includes red flag laws. Because every time I've seen a mental health issue in the Army, that soldier is immediately separated from their weapon. And that includes safe storage. I was just on base a couple hours ago, and I toured the vault, which has all of our weapons. So if it's good enough for the Army, it should be good enough for Arizona. And that's the bill I'd like to run next year. And also the speech I gave on the floor a couple days ago. On reproductive rights, I was one of the people that helped get off the ground the Arizonans for Reproductive Freedom. It's a statewide ballot initiative, and that is exactly what I want. It's a constitutional protection that's going to be voter protected and cannot be meddled with by legislators. And that exact ballot initiative is what I want for reproductive rights and reproductive. And then for voting rights, I want to see us claw back a lot of these silly Republican bills. I talk about this a lot on the floor, but getting back to the PEVL instead of the EVL. So the permanent early voting list, same day registration, and then removing some of the barriers around identification that just make it really difficult to voting. We should promote voting. We shouldn't try to restrict it. So thank you.
Thank you. Nathan, you're up next. Unmute, Nathan.
Thank you.
Okay.
So on guns, we need to ban high capacity magazines. We need to ban assault rifles. We need a 14-day waiting period, universal background checks for every sale, including private sales and gun show sales, red flag laws, safe storage laws, and we need to raise the age to purchase firearms to 21. Moving on to reproductive rights. We need a constitutional amendment to the Arizona Legislature codifying the precedents under Roe and Casey to ensure that access to abortion care remains legal and accessible before viability. That has been the law of the land for decades. It is very widely accepted by the majority, and we need to codify that in the Constitution to ensure that it can't be tinkered with by a stacked Supreme Court. And I think that the current ballot initiative is probably the best way forward. Moving on to voting, we need same day and automatic voting registration. Election day should be a holiday. We need to restore the permanent early voter list, protect the rights, make sure that we do this, protect the rights to initiative, recall, and referendum. We've seen the Arizona Supreme Court really attack our abilities and our constitutional rights to hold the people that we elect to represent us accountable. We need to reinforce that. The last thing, we need to reform the Independent Redistricting Commission to ensure that we do not have gerrymandering, the type of gerrymandering that we saw happen just last year.
Thank you. Nancy, you're next.
As far as gun sense legislation, I am a gun sense candidate of distinction with Moms Demand Action. So I would say we need red flag laws. We need to close the loopholes for gun shows, which one is happening this weekend in Tucson. We need no guns on campus, any of our campuses for any reasons. As far as reproductive freedom and rights, I fully support the ballot initiative. Right now, I'm getting signatures and helping that group with that to codify Roe v. Wade. I believe that we should all have that right and not have to have the government involved at all or explain it. As far as voting goes, yes, restoring the PEVL, keeping mail-in and early ballots going because there has not been any fraud associated with that. More drop-off sites that we're currently working on in Pima County. And I would like to see in government high school classes that all students are required to take their senior year, I would like to see League of Women Voters come in and register students to vote and have that just be part of the curriculum so that when students leave high school, they are ready to be voters. Thank you.
Thank you. And last of all, Chris.
Well, there have been a lot of great ideas mentioned already on on gun violence, a couple of weeks ago, it was the day after the shooting in Texas, talking about the differences in our political realities, Democrats versus Republicans. The Republicans in our chamber didn't mention it. And there were some allusions to what had happened, but they didn't mention it. And I understand there's political reality, but there's also reality. And so I rose and took the mic and we tried working with the Democratic lawyers, a parliamentary maneuver to get off of the critical race theory bill, which is basically an assault on teachers. This is the day after what happened in Texas, if you can imagine, and to try to go to Jen Longden's background check bill. It didn't work. There are more Republicans than there are of us, but it was a jarring day. So on gun safety, yeah, background checks, closing a gun show loophole, banning assault weapons, banning high capacity magazines. As far as reproductive rights, I agree with what's been said. We essentially need to codify Roe, whether it happens legislatively or through initiatives. I support the one this year. If for whatever reason that doesn't pass, certainly we need to do it in 2024. Also repealing the 15-week ban. Also with voting rights for restoring the Pebble, same-day voting, and just making voting as easy as possible.
Thank you. Okay. So our next question. Many of the Republicans in the Arizona legislature are very open, make no bones about wanting to dismantle public education. This is not a conspiracy. They come out and they say it. They seek to accomplish this largely by defunding it and by creating strangling strictures on what is taught and how it is taught. Here's the question. What do you see as the biggest threat to the integrity of public education, K through university, in the current political structure? And specifically, how do you plan to address it in the legislature? And we're going to start with Priya.
Okay. Oh, I'll wait. Okay. I think both of what you mentioned are the biggest threats. So defunding our public education has long been a goal of the Republicans in our legislature. I was in law school here at the U of A when the recession happened, and the legislature took that opportunity to not only continue the cuts to K-12 education, but also to the universities. And so we've seen increases in tuition at our university levels, which dissuades people from pursuing higher education. We also, of course, continue to see those cuts to the K-12 education and low teacher pay. All of these things are taking away from that experience. The standardized testing has long. I was in high school here when Ames was instituted as a requirement, and our marching band even spelled out Ames on the field because we were so angry about that being instituted. And so teachers, of course, don't love to teach to the test. Our teachers here can talk to that more than I can as well. But I also agree that, the requirements that where the legislature is starting to talk about, don't talk about this, talk about this instead, are just making our teachers' lives harder. It's dissuading people from joining the profession. The low pay is certainly not a good thing. But on top of that, the fear of parents and others going after them.
Okay. Next, Charlie.
All right. Gosh, to narrow down the single problem is a bit difficult. But if I had to pin it down, I would say it really just comes down to funding. The strangling requirements for what teachers can teach is a problem, but I think it's a problem that teachers are used to having to deal with. So we can knock that down afterwards, after we actually get more teachers in our classrooms, some actual fully staffed schools, which involves us increasing teacher pay. And the way that we're going to have to accomplish that, I mean, that's an uphill battle here in Arizona, because in order to actually increase funding to the degree that it needs to be increased, we have to actually increase the state budget, which is almost impossible in the current legislature, because because any increase requires a 2/3 approval from both houses. So I honestly think that the only way that's ever going to happen is if the voters get together and actually amend our Arizona Constitution to get rid of the 2/3 requirement to increase state revenues.
Okay, thank you. Morgan.
So I'm going to quote my mom here, and then I'm going to tell her I quoted her when I call her later. So she'll love that. But my mom's a teacher. She's been a teacher for about 30 years. And so she calls it the vicious cycle of killing public education in Arizona. And what that is you defund the schools, and then you allow more charters and more private schools around it. And so then naturally students leave the public schools and go to other ones. And then you continue defunding, and then more students leave, and you continue defunding, and more students leave. That alone is the biggest threat. We've seen this play out my whole life over the last 30 plus years. And it's just going to continue, and it's going to get worse and worse and worse unless we put our foot down and we stop the defunding and we increase funding. I mentioned earlier, when I was in high school, we spent more money per pupil inflation adjusted on public schools than we do now. We need to reverse that. And that's what I'm working on at the legislature. Every single day, I'm on the phone with one person, a gentleman named Paul Boyer in the Senate, because he is our last holdout at the legislature in order to get $1 billion for our public schools this year. And so every day I'm talking to him, making sure he's not going to cave, making sure we can count on him to push for our public schools. Because again, to quote my mom, the only way we get out of this vicious cycle, this vicious circle, is by infusing billions of dollars into our public schools. And this year we can do that with our budget surplus.
Thank you. Nathan. You're on.
Okay. So Morgan's absolutely right. The plan is to defund public schools so that more people go to charters in order to, say that we need to put more in charters and get vouchers. It is a whole thing. Charlie's right. We have to repeal the 1990s constitutional amendment that has made it impossible to raise taxes. The biggest threat, though, to our public schools is another economic downturn and a loss in tax revenue to the state. So during the Great Recession, I was in high school. I was a junior. And I remember my teachers, everyone who was hired within the last 10 years got a pink slip that they could be fired at any time if the school district ever really ran out of money. And that caused a lot of them to decide to leave the profession. If we have an economic downturn again, we have no means to fully fund our public education. And make no mistake that the Republicans will use that as a way to get vouchers to defund public education more. It is really low on funding, but make no mistake that the Republicans will, if they can, spend less on our public schools so that they can spend more on private and charters so that the owners of those schools can make more money.
Thank you. Nancy.
Well, this is a huge reason why I'm running. And I agree with Morgan's mom and Morgan that it is the defunding. We need to fully fund our public schools. But I think one of the biggest threats right now is that there is a big lie in education in Arizona. And it's the lie that the radical right is telling people that teachers don't care and that we're groomers and that we're teaching CRT, when that is not true. And it is debilitating our profession. It is debilitating public education, and I will not stand for it. It is why I believe that as a teacher, I am qualified to be in the State House. They need to hear from current teachers who have lived through this pandemic and lived through this big lie. Teachers do not go into education in Arizona for the money. We go into it because we are passionate about students and we're passionate about learning and our subject areas. If we allow our teachers to teach their passion and their subject areas, the students win every single time. They win. And I do believe that if we get more teachers in our House and Senate and we can speak passionately about that, we can change minds. Yes, we need to fully fund our public education. Yes, I will fight for that. But we have to stop this big lie and stop making teachers the bad guys. I will protect my students no matter what.
Thank you, Nancy. Chris.
Well, I certainly agree with everything that's been said. There's so much there, and there's so many ways that public education is under threat in the state of Arizona. I think the original question got to kind of what is the one thing that's the gravest threat, and I guess if I had to pick, I would say that it's this concept of vouchers. And one of the things that's going on in the legislature right now is in the House, there is a move afoot to greatly expand vouchers to the point where they would essentially supplant the public education system. And what this means is public dollars, tax dollars, would go to pay for private schools. And that there are a number of these folks that have that as their goal. And I think it's nuts that anybody, frankly, in the United States of America or the state of Arizona would think that was a good idea. However, there are a number of folks in the Republican caucus, and at least in the House, and I think probably in the Senate as well, that do. So I think as far as what we need to be, is the one policy thing that we need to be fighting for and focused on is that, because I tell you what, that's their goal.
Thank you. Last up is Kat.
Have to be, oh, sorry. Have to be last in this crowd. So many great ideas and responses. I really agree with a lot of what's been said already. I think Morgan laid out the plan that Republicans have had, the strategy, in a really great way. And that's been the strategy since the 1954 Supreme Court decision, Brown versus the School Board of Education. And the plan has been to make sure that the schools do not desegregate, to reinstate that segregation. And that's why public schools that service Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities have been the most under threat. My family is a CODA family, children of deaf adults. My family also has a member that is special needs. My youngest daughter receives special accommodations. Charter schools have made it very difficult to gain quality education for my kids. One charter school actually kept our kids for about 40 days before booting them out, saying that they couldn't accommodate them because they were special needs. And that's a very common tactic of charter schools. It creates a very segregated thing. We have to stop using public funds to fund vouchers.
Thanks. Okay, so now we have our last question, and we are going to probably run a little bit over because of our little realignment we had to do right before we started. So here is question number 6. And then after this question, you'll have a minute each to wrap up, but I'll introduce that. So here's question 6. This job of legislator in Arizona is difficult, especially in the minority party. I know we all hope we're going to flip it, but there's a chance we're going to be the minority since there hasn't been a majority in the House since 1965. The environment can be toxic. The stress is high. Success is elusive. The travel from Pima County is grueling. The compensation, even with the recently increased per diem, does not begin to appropriately compensate you for your time and effort required. I don't think this is news to any of you. Here's the question. Please tell us why you want this job and what you have done. And this is the other part. You have to answer this part too. And what you have done in your life that prepares you for this hard job. It's a hard job. Okay, we're going to start with Charlie.
All right. Yeah, it is a hard job. That's what I've heard from everybody who's done it. And a lot of the people, whenever I tell them that I'm running for office, they say, why would you do that to yourself? But the fact is, I've always done hard jobs. I come from a family that was pretty poor, and I've just worked my way through college with 2 jobs, and while also having a full-time student schedule. I know what it means to grind and not feel like you're actually making headway for years. And that's also my experience as a business owner. We're a successful business now, but most of our success came in the past 5 years. Whenever I first came on, we were making poverty rate wages because we were just trying to make the thing work. And so that's my experience of just being a crusader and plugging away for years until eventually we can find the success that most people would think is almost impossible. And yeah, perseverance is the name of the game.
Thank you. Next up, Morgan.
So I'm running to get back to the legislature because I think I'm doing good work now and making a difference for Tucson and Pima County. My true why is that I grew up in Arizona, and I grew up at a time when we valued public schools more than we do now. And we also had more opportunity in this state than we do now. And I see that that's changed in the last 15 to 20 years. And it drives me nuts and it breaks my heart. And I want to do everything I can to restore the glory of our public schools with funding, which also increases the opportunity. I'm running to get back to the legislature because I think I'm making a big difference there. I'm killing a lot of bills. I'm forming relationships with members on the other side in order to not only kill those bills, but put our democratic priorities in their legislation. And that's really hard work. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of trust. But it's something that I'm doing right now and been very successful at this year. And I want to continue to do that for Pima County and for Tucson. And then last, I have a unique perspective that I think is really valued in the Democratic caucus. And that's I'm someone that not only has a deep and vast knowledge of water, but also finance and business background. I typically help our caucus understand anything with money or finance related. And that's like 90% of the bills at the legislature, just because we deal with budgeting so much. And so I think I'm a huge value to the Democratic caucus and also a value to Tucson and Pima County getting us wins.
Thank you. Nathan.
There we go. So I was born and raised here in Tucson. I went through public education in the Amphi district at Pima Community College and at the U of A. And the reason why I'm running is because if the trend continues, if we keep going in the direction that we've been going, I don't know if I'd feel comfortable raising a family here. I don't know if the schools that my wife and I went to would be a place that we know that our kids could get the best education. I don't know if this is a place where in 2070, when I'm retired, that this will be hospitable. If we do nothing, I really see this as an existential crisis for our state and for our future. And we have to have Democrats who go to the legislature who have big ideas. We're not going to take back the legislature. We might get parity this cycle if we're incredibly lucky. Next cycle, I think, is more possible. I think we can take the legislature later in the decade, depending on how people move around. When that happens, when we do take over, We must have Democrats who have built up legislative policies so that we can govern effectively. This is the thing. The people of Arizona and the people of America want a government that works. They hate Congress because it doesn't do anything. When the Democrats take over, we have to be able to say, here's our education bill, let's move it forward. Here's our healthcare bill, let's move it forward.
Thank you. Nancy.
Well, when you were reading the description of the job, stressful, toxic, low compensation, it sounds a lot like my current job as a public school teacher. And my husband would say I'm just a glutton for jobs that have a high ask and not a very high give. But the truth is that I feel responsible for my two daughters and every single one of my students that I've ever had. And I am in this to make a difference. And I would not be in this if I didn't think I could. I do believe I have the skills to go to the House and make a difference for all of us. I have been a teacher. I have been a military spouse. I've raised my two daughters with in several different states with a spouse that travels a lot. I know what hard work is. I haven't always gotten paid for the jobs that I've done. I've been a volunteer most of my life, and that's okay. Because when I see that something needs to be righted, I am there to do that work. And that is what I will continue to do, whether I'm elected or not, to be honest, but I want to be elected. So this is for myself. It's for my students. It's for my family. And it's for my daughters. And I want them to be proud of me and know that I did everything I could. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris, you're next.
Yes, so boy, the quote really spoke to me. You know, it can be a hard job, but the reality is there are a lot of hard jobs, and there are a lot of jobs that are a lot harder than this job. It can be frustrating, but what is also true is that it's a privilege to do this job. And if you like this type of thing, and if you want to try to have an impact, you like working with people, you like hearing different stakeholder perspectives, there's really nothing better to be doing. And I've really enjoyed it tremendously. And there are really no bad days. And it's just been, it's been a true privilege to do it. I think that there is a very steep learning curve, even for somebody. I had done a lot of legislative work, legal work, policy work, but it's the past 7 months have been, there's just a lot to learn, and the bills come at you very fast. It's a front-loaded kind of session that we have. And so to have that 7-month experience when we get to next January to have had a year experience, I just think is really invaluable, especially since we're losing so much talent. Again, Randy Freeze is already gone, Pam, Victoria Steele in our delegation. So that's why I want to come back. I think I'll be able to fight for Southern Arizona very effectively next time.
Thank you. Kat.
Very excited to answer this question. So I have been a hard worker my entire life. I am a single mom who worked for years as a waitress, which is a pretty difficult job. I don't need to tell you. I went deaf in 2020 and in the middle of the Biden-Harris campaign, as a matter of fact, and still found a way to make it work. I've spent the last 2 years learning sign language and joining the deaf community. So I'm not afraid of a challenge, and I'm definitely not afraid of hard work. I'm also a survivor of domestic violence and had to navigate a lot of really difficult systems, working with DCS, working with the courts, figuring out how to get no contact orders and emergency orders, figuring out how to get special needs services for 2 traumatized children. All of that has compelled me to help other people. And that's why I'm here. I spent the last several years doing advocacy work, helping people one-on-one, getting orders of protection, finding legal aid, all of those things that are so hard to navigate, especially if you've never been in the system before. And now I'm here because I really want to help people on a broader scale. And that's really been my calling for the last several years. And now I want to do that in the legislature. Thank you.
Thank you. Priya.
I have never taken it easy. I have two parents who are immigrants to this country, and they have definitely instilled that well-known immigrant work ethic in me. And, going to college my senior year at MIT was no breeze, even though it was senior year and we wanted to relax. So it's been a tough road. And I've dedicated myself to applying that to making change. Specifically in the last 2 years, I have been teaching full-time at the university while having my first kid, while leading the Arizona Democratic Party's Election Integrity Committee and the Asian American Pacific Islander Caucus. So I have been already adept at marrying the family and the job and the advocacy perspectives all together. And so I plan to take that work ethic to the legislature on behalf of our new District 18. I also will say that I have spent my career, I've built my career as an environmental advocate and environmental lawyer. That was especially challenging during the Trump administration. Survived, and we did it. Came back to Arizona briefly to be voter protection staff during the 2018 cycle, and we did it. We flipped, all of us, the collective, we flipped many statewide seats, and we will again this cycle. So I want to take my advocacy and commitment to represent you.
Thank you. Okay, that's the end of the questions. So what we have now is a wrap up. Each of you has 1 minute to wrap up, and we're going to start in the same order that we did the introductions. So we're going to start with Morgan. 1 minute.
Perfect. Well, I talked about how I'm working hard as a legislator to pass progressive ideas and stop bad bills. But in the context of a job interview, I want to tell you about some of my references. I have a couple endorsements because I've been able to deliver for Pima County and Tucson. Supervisor Matt Hines and Supervisor Sharon Bronson endorsed me because of all the things I've been able to get for Pima County. Council member Paul Cunningham, same idea, what I've been able to get the city of Tucson, specifically a water plant. And then, of course, former legislators that I think have been really positive for our region, Jonathan Rothschild, former mayor, and Steve Farley, someone who held this specific seat. All of them endorse me because they see the work I'm doing at the legislature, and they want me to go back to keep fighting for Southern Arizona, for Tucson, for Pima County. So again, in the context of a job interview, those are my references, and I so appreciate the opportunity. I'm glad I got to be here and I got to be free from the Army for a little bit, and thank you all for being here.
Thanks, Morgan. Next, Nathan.
So thanks for putting this on. I'm glad we had another chance to kind of speak with this group. I am a former teacher. I have was born and raised here in Tucson. I have gone through the process. I've gone through taking care of someone through end of life care, my dad. So when I say that, education is important to me, it's because I've been in the classroom and because I've seen what our kids are going through and what our teachers are going through. When I say that healthcare is incredibly important, it's because I've seen my family struggle through it, and I've seen other people struggle through it. I do want to say just at the closing that I wish I had more time to expand on some of my policies. Next Monday on the 13th, I'll be speaking to DGT. I hope you can tune in and I can answer any questions that anybody has and go into much greater detail. Thank you for having us.
Thanks a lot, Nathan. Nancy.
Thank you so much for having us. I appreciate the opportunity. I have spent my life caring deeply about our community and fighting for what I think is right. And I will fight for our students, our teachers. I will fight for our rights over our own bodies and for the right to vote. I will protect our water. This isn't just something I want to do as a job. This is my passion, and I feel called to do this. I'm asking for your votes, and I will not take any of the support for granted. I want this chance to further what I've done in the classroom since '94 and to be a voice in our state house. Thank you.
Thanks, Nancy. Chris. Oh, unmute, Chris. Unmute.
Sorry about that. Thank you so much, Priya and Gail and Susan and Brian and everybody who put this together. I believe that my legal, legislative, and policy background have put me in a position to hit the ground running in Phoenix. I've learned a lot in the past 7 months. I think that, as I mentioned earlier, there's a steep learning curve. You have to just learning the committee structure, as Morgan has mentioned a number of times, learning about the other members, our coworkers, is takes some time and it takes some work, but it is really the only way that we're going to get good things done for Southern Arizona. So I just think there's a real advantage to having that experience, and I would like to be able to build on that experience and represent all of you in the House and LD18. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chris. Next up is Kat.
First, I want to thank you guys so much for this opportunity to let us differentiate ourselves a little bit. I think this was such a productive idea. And as always, thank you so much for providing the captions. It's a really important accommodation that gives me access to meetings like this. As I mentioned in my intro, and briefly in my answer, I'm running to represent our entire community. A lot of the issues we discussed today are issues that I'm facing on a daily basis, that my family is facing on a daily basis. And those are the same issues facing the constituents of LD18. I'm a parent, an advocate, and a working class citizen. I'm really looking forward to talking to you all more as we hurtle towards the primary. Thank you again so much for having me. Thank you.
Thanks, Kat. Priya.
Hi, yes. So in closing, I have significant experience and qualifications to bring to represent you in the Senate. I again, have spent my career being an environmental advocate, and I'm consistently on the right side of the environment. Again, want to highlight that I will not accept money from fossil fuel or utility PACs. If I were to list my references, I would have to emphasize again that these are folks who believe I'm the strongest on climate and the environment. Groups like Climate Cabinet, which has endorsed me, Council Member Kevin Dahl, TUSD member, School Board Member Ravi Shah, and State Senator Rosanna Gabaldon from our neighboring district, who I look forward to working with in the Senate, again, because of my environmental background and credentials. I've also been endorsed by Runs for Something, very exciting. But yes, I just, again, want to underline, I'm going to be fighting for you and for the people.
Thank you, Priya. And we'll wind up with Charlie.
Yeah, thank you all for coming. Again, I'm Charlie Verdin, running for the State House here in LD18. You can look me up and get more information about me at charlieverdin.com. My favorite part of running for office is getting to talk to so many people. And while there's no way to talk to all of the thousands of voters in this district, if you're on this call, you are already proving that you are an active and involved voter. And I can absolutely make time to talk to you, to each of you. So please get in touch with me. I would really love to hear from you and talk one-on-one. You can get my contact information on my website, charlieverdin.com. Thank you all again for attending. We have a lot of really great candidates, and you voters have a tough job ahead of you choosing who will best represent you. At the very least, I think we can all rest easy knowing that we'll be in good hands whichever of us wins. So thank you again to the LD18 Democrats for organizing this event. I'm Charlie Verdin, and I look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you. Okay, that wraps up our forum. Thank you very much for your patience. We ran 16 minutes over, but that wasn't too bad. There was a couple other really good questions we had in our hip pocket and we didn't get to ask, but thank you very much. Susan, do you want to say anything here at the end?
I just want to thank you. Well, I'm not muted. I want to thank you, Greer, for all of your hard work. Maria, Pat, and Gail for being a strict timekeeper. Thank you so much. And Good night, everyone. Enjoy their weekend.
Thank you. Thanks to everybody. Bye.